Hello, everyone. Welcome to ESL Talk.
We are your hosts, Faye.
And Daniel. So, after touching on the important topic of mental health and well being last week, we've decided to take another exploration into a new topic today.
Yes, we're going to talk about how we can start to build our careers and transition or pivot away from the ESL classroom using skills and experience for different kinds of jobs with teaching and education. Now, today we will be joined by our special guest, Andrew, who has recently decided to move on from teaching ESL to pursue a bachelor's degree and become a teacher in the public system here in Canada.
Yeah, it's really important to remember that, us as ESL teachers, we wear many hats. So, we need to think about how these different roles can help us to take the next step in our teaching career, and what are some other areas where we can diversify our ESL teaching as well.
So let's start by talking about some other jobs we have done outside of traditional ESL teaching, and how these complement us or help us with our teaching skills and vice versa.
So, Faye, what were some jobs that you did before teaching, while teaching, and since becoming a professional teacher?
Well, yeah, I've mentioned this before, but I started out as a designer first, a product designer. I even worked at a toy factory back in Brazil. I designed puzzles. I designed a board game. That was my first job experience, actually. And then I started teaching, and I actually liked that better. But while teaching, I also did a little bit of translating, which is similar, but actually it requires a very different skill set. We had an episode on that before, right?
We
On
did.
interpreting and translating. Then I've just decided to stick with teaching. But recently, I've had to learn a lot of other skills as well.
So, Faye, how did those jobs help you develop as a teacher and launch your new career as a result?
Well, first of all, I think that my experience with design has always been really helpful for me when designing my own materials, or even when thinking about activities and practical activities, especially because I worked with games and all that. So I always incorporated a lot of games into my classes. And I still use that a lot now for my Instagram, for instance. I do all of my post designs, and I do our Instagram posts as well. And that has really helped me become independent in that sense, really create my own materials and designs. Yeah, that's mostly what has been helpful for me, I believe. And for my new career, I ended up having to learn how to edit video and, take a few classes online for like After Effects and things like that. Now, I know you also got a degree in a different field before going into ESL, right?
Yeah, that's right, Faye. So initially, I did want to actually teach PE and sports. That was the initial goal for me. But after a few years, I kind of decided that I enjoyed teaching English more, and I was always good at English when I was in school. So I felt that that would be a better path to kind of go down. And then from that, it wasn't just kind of teaching English in the classroom. Obviously, it then transitioned to teaching online, teaching at the university level, writing books, doing academic writing, doing language assessment, lots and lots of different hats as well. So even though the field itself wasn't quite related to ESL, it did end up becoming that and branched off in lots of different ways as a result.
And have you ever thought about how you will use your skills and experience gained so far to help you in your future teaching and education career?
Yeah, I'm constantly, like you said, putting new things together. So I'm designing a lot of curriculum and kind of making my own curriculums, which I kind of deliver online. I'm constantly making materials and content for my students in my university jobs, and also in my online teaching jobs. As well, I enjoy writing. I wrote a few books last year. So that's obviously combining all the skills that I've put together over the last few years. And then in the future, I'm hoping to kind of do more things independently, maybe kind of work more on my own terms, if that makes sense. But we'll see, because I really do love what I do at the moment. And then on top of that, perhaps in the future, maybe helping people who want to move to new countries, who need help from a legal aspect as well as from a language aspect. If I can combine those, that would be amazing. But again, that is something maybe for the future, but we will see. But everything I've done so far, all the jobs that I've done have really helped me, and they've all complemented or benefited each other in some ways.
Right. It seems like there's no experience that's just lost, right? It all kind of adds on to what you have.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, how did you develop yourself professionally, and why did you feel it was necessary to kind of keep developing?
Yeah. As we mentioned before, like both of us had to get more certified, right? Because we both kind of started without much in terms of technical training or even theoretical training and teaching. So I did feel that need of getting the certificate and then the diploma and then my master's, which wasn't necessary, but I just really felt like I was really interested in the field. I really wanted to study more about language acquisition and linguistics and all that, and just made me feel more confident as a professional. Now, more recently, as I mentioned, I've been trying to develop my other skills to help me be a self-employed online teacher, right? So like I mentioned, doing online courses on video editing. I did a couple of courses on social media, even marketing for social media, and joining different teacher groups online and different courses for teachers, just to keep up or stay up to date on all these changes that are happening now, with our market and the field. I feel like there's just so much that's opened up to us. And it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, these last couple of years, I think I've seen it now, kind of as we're coming out of the COVID pandemic, is that some teachers have kind of stood still and just kind of stagnated in some ways, but a lot of teachers have really embraced this time, and they've used it to learn more skills, improve their knowledge and their understanding, and educate themselves more in some ways. And I think it's always great to try to learn more, because the more you know, the more you grow, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And why do you think it's important for us to have these different options and alternatives outside of simply ESL teaching?
I've talked about this 100 times, but I think it's always worth repeating. When it comes to working in a traditional, brick and mortar setting in a school or a language college or whatever the setting might be, there's no guarantee that that's always going to be there. It might be there in the short term or the medium term, but we just don't know what's going to happen, as we found out a couple of years ago. Places where we've worked, Faye, no longer exist, or the programs no longer exist. So it's always wise and prudent to at least have 2 or 3 things that you can do and that you can fall back on, not as kind of things that you feel like, oh, it's there if I have to do it. More finding what you enjoy, what you like, what you're passionate about, and following that. So again, obviously my example will be different to a lot of others, but for me, it's kind of, a couple of university classes, which are, a couple of days a week, a couple of days of online teaching with my own students, 1 day of language assessment, maybe 1 day of proofreading or writing. And then that way, instead of having to worry and really panic if maybe one job or one opportunity doesn't work out, there's 3 or 4 other things there that I can develop and grow and expand if I need to in the future.
Yeah,
I think that's
very
really
wise.
valuable. Yeah, exactly. And I think we all need to start thinking this way. And I think subconsciously, a lot of us are doing it as well, because we just don't know what's around the corner. So at least if things are in our own hands and we can control those things, then that will definitely help with our anxiety, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
For you, Faye, and from what you've experienced in your circles, what are some other jobs traditional ESL teachers can do to boost their income?
Yeah, so as you mentioned a few of them, but I think some easy things to do, not easy, but things that are more accessible for people to start doing are maybe like assessment, you don't have to be an IELTS examiner per se, but there are lots of opportunities to assess exams for different institutions. And nowadays you can do it all online. So it's something you can do from home. I think that's something that is really interesting to do, and something that it takes a little bit of effort to get into. All of the exam criteria you need to learn, just that learning curve might be a little bit steep at the beginning, but it is something that you can easily learn to do if you are an experienced teacher, at least. Another thing, as you mentioned, like proofreading and editing, I've been approached by a few people for that as well, just for university students and things like that. And also tutoring, I think, is something that's really easy to do, because traditional ESL teaching, like you said, just going to a school or institution is what most of us end up doing when we begin. But it's very very common for your students to want to keep studying with you individually. Try not to always say no to that. I've done that in the past because I've never been a huge fan of tutoring. I prefer the classroom interaction setting, but it's a good way to just build that bond with a student that you already know and have that extra source of income, and just fall back on that if needed. So, and you build kind of your client base that way. What else?
Yeah.
What would you add to that?
I think, yep, tutoring either in a local setting or online is a really great thing you can do. Like you said, proofreading or editing, helping people with their resumes or their applications or their essays even, as long as it's done in a professional and ethical way. I think that's a really useful thing. A lot of jobs now that exist online are for transcription. So if you're really good at another language other than English, then you can use that and put that to work for transcribing videos. I know that's quite a popular thing to do. There's also websites like Fiverr and Upwork where you can maybe advertise some other skills that you might have in other areas. Or, for example, if you're really skilled at writing or you're really skilled at graphic design or creating things, then that can be really useful. Developing curriculum, if that's something you enjoy, developing lessons and materials. There's a lot of places to sell that as well and to, use that for good. And I think one more thing, like you mentioned, is language assessment. And like you say, it doesn't have to be the IELTS. It can be different conversational exams or writing exams or things like that. So there's lots and lots of opportunities provided you look in the right places and you put in a little bit of groundwork. Wow, we've really opened up this discussion. And there's so many more options beyond simply teaching ESL in a traditional setting.
Well, let's now hear from Andrew, who has also started to transition from ESL teaching into new and exciting areas of education.
Hello, Andrew. Welcome to ESL Talk.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I'm sure our listeners are very interested to hear about your journey and how they can develop themselves professionally in terms of their teaching career in general.
So, Andrew, can you start off by sharing a little with us about your teaching journey so far?
So I've been a teacher in the ESL world or ELL or EAL, whichever you prefer, for about 16 years. I started in 2005, I guess. My goal was always to be a teacher or educator of some sort. After university, I was kind of sick of going to post-secondary for a bit. But I wanted to be a teacher. So I got my qualification, and then that sort of led me into this career. I've taught in Canada. I've taught overseas, and most of my experience has been with private schools, almost exclusively with private schools.
And mostly adults, or you taught children?
I've taught adults and children. I've taught, age range goes from about 3 to about 65.
Wow. Nice.
Mostly smaller classes.
And what first appealed you to go to ESL teaching particularly?
Like I said, my goal was always to be a teacher. I wanted to help people to achieve whatever goals they happen to have, and that's sort of what being a teacher is all about. My original thought was to become an elementary school teacher, but because I just decided to put off that part, that the training that was necessary for that, and I got into ESL, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed teaching ESL. My academic background is in history, but I'm a big English language nerd now. Which developed over the 16 years. So I'm very interested in sort of the bits and pieces of English, and it's a lot of fun to do that.
That's very true. I guess most of us turn out that way. And when did you first realize that this like private ESL school career path was not sustainable in the long term for you?
I mean, not sustainable in what way?
Well, made you think that this was maybe not a long-term plan for you anymore.
So in terms of there's a lot of things that were going on there. Let's clear the dirty financial stuff out of the way. It's a very precarious position to be in a private ESL school here in Canada, and I would assume in any native speaker English country, because despite the fact that I think we are, trained professionals who have a very specific skill set, English is, hey, anyone can do that. And so we're very replaceable. Now, that's not true, but that's, I think, how we're often viewed.
Yeah, there does seem to be that attitude, which isn't the case, because obviously we do need qualifications and we need to have a significant amount of experience to do this. So it is quite interesting why that kind of belief exists. But Andrew, what do you think are the main issues with the current ESL industry that might drive others to do as you did and maybe transition or branch out from this field?
Well, like I said, we can talk about the dirty financial aspect of it first, but for me, it was actually something that was much more important or significant. It was because I've mostly worked in the private system, and this is my take, and if other people have different experiences, obviously, than I might have, but I basically view the ownership of private ESL schools on a sliding scale of cynicism. From we want to make some money, but we still care about our students at the very nice extreme, and to students are just a dollar sign to us and we don't care. And I think we can all agree that we got into this because we genuinely care about people and we want to help them, and that makes us exploitable.
It's true. It's a good point,
right? So when your boss gets, the owner of your school, the management, whatever, gets to the point where students are just walking ATMs, they will do whatever they can to save money, and that often comes at the expense of students and the expense of teachers. And it was really emotionally and mentally wearing for me, to the point where I love teaching, but I hated going into work every day.
Right.
And so I just had to get out.
Yeah. And it's so true. That's something that, I hadn't thought of before, but it's a huge dichotomy there, because, like, as you said, none of us really get into teaching to become rich. We know that teachers are not among the top, high earners, those professions, but we do it because we love what we do. And in general, the private industry just needs to make money. So
I've worked for a number of different private companies, and some have definitely been more interested in student fulfillment and student growth than others. And those are ones that are nicer to work for. But Daniel, you asked about issues that are driving people out of ESL. It's hard times out there, right?
It is.
COVID-19 is.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Do you think that sped up the decision-making process for you? Because I know it probably has for a lot of others.
Yeah, two points there. One, the more desperate a school gets, and COVID-19 has made most schools desperate, the more likely they are to move towards that extremely cynical way of viewing things. And two, COVID for me was just a great opportunity to get out of a situation that I wasn't particularly happy in.
I think every cloud has a silver lining, and I can't speak for everyone, but I know that this time's actually been great for me to reflect and organize and kind of refocus my energies in different places. So
and same here. It's just kind of given me that push to finally do what I've been meaning to do before. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I got off my duff and applied for the BEd once I engineered my dismissal.
Wonderful.
So now your path. No. So what is your plan now? Can you tell our listeners what you're doing?
So currently I am enrolled in the Bachelor of Education degree at University of British Columbia, which is something I had meant to do 16 years ago, but just now I'm getting around to. So there you go. And that will make me able to teach in the public sector here in British Columbia, and it'll give me a lot more options if I choose to go elsewhere. So that's really good. I know that when you asked me to be on this, the title was about leaving ESL, and I kind of want to hang a question mark on that, which maybe we can get to later. Am I actually leaving ESL?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've discussed.
Does anyone ever?
Yeah, we've discussed more about branching out, diversifying, maybe not leaving, but just kind of expanding our range of what we can do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and part of what I've been learning has been that the sort of things that we do in ESL can be universalized and help non-ESL learners. I mean, I'm going to become a secondary school teacher, and reading levels vary from, at grade or higher to below grade for native speakers, as well as for non-native speakers. And so the same ideas that we employ in the ESL field can be employed, for anyone, and be pretty valuable. And that's been a lot of fun to sort of work with and think about.
It's quite interesting you mentioned that, Andrew, because I went through the same process. I taught in South Korea for 4 years, and then I came back to the UK and did my teaching license, kind of my teaching certification. And it was quite interesting making that transition and that jump kind of in reverse in a way, which was a little bit strange. But for you, Andrew, how do you think studying and completing this BEd, how do you think it'll make you a better teacher, and in what ways will it maybe develop some of your skills?
One of the things that I've always been concerned about as far as my own professional development goes is that I have a pretty decent amount of experience in the classroom, but my theory is pretty light. And so adding to my knowledge of theory can help my practice in the classroom, sharpen my ability to design and implement lessons, to understanding by design and universally designed learning and things like that in a much more effective way. And I think I've already been experiencing that in some of the work that we've been doing in classes, and my own experience in the practicums that we've been doing as well.
That's interesting. And in terms of your ESL teaching experience, you already mentioned this a little bit, but what specific aspects do you believe will help you as you transition into this different type of teaching?
So the other day we were doing a workshop specifically designed to help ESL learners in our social studies classroom. Social studies is the program that the cohort that I'm in. And one of the things that they showed us was a Freyer model, which is a way of organizing vocabulary that's used in some ESL classrooms. And we were immediately seeing that and saying, well, okay, that could be used to organize concepts in social studies for ESL and non-ESL learners. We were looking at certain reading techniques and how they could be used to help ESL and non-ESL learners, parse through primary documents or secondary documents, things like that. So.
No, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think your experience, that's a very specific example of something that if you don't have experience actually using that, then it can become more abstract too, right?
Yeah, it's more tools for the toolbox, and the more tools you have, the more you can kind of pick them out when you need them and as you need them. So, Andrew, would you encourage all ESL teachers to upskill and develop themselves professionally?
Teachers are constantly reflecting on their own practice and, trying to refine it. But there's only so much I think that you can do on your own, and engaging in professional development and retraining in different careers or different career paths in education, definitely valuable. I would say that there have been some really, really valuable courses and really, really valuable things that I've learned in this program. Having been a teacher for 16 years, I can definitely say that I'm probably a better teacher now that I've taken these courses than I was, a year ago. All of these new techniques and skills and tools and whatnot, they require practice, and I certainly need to get more comfortable working with them. But still, I think it'll make me a better teacher.
Awesome. If you could give one piece of advice to maybe, teachers who are just starting, or maybe they've recently started teaching ESL, either online or in a face-to-face scenario, what advice would you give them? What would you share with them?
For teaching, I think I think what you just said about adding tools to the toolkit, about upskilling, constantly do that. Always be seeking out those opportunities. There were a number of times in my own career when I had the opportunity to go to professional development workshops, and I always weighed them, and I thought, no, I'm going to be away from my students, and I usually turned them down because I didn't want to leave my students, and I think that was probably not the best decision. So I was teaching a really specific program, and it was really difficult for me to find substitutes at the time, so I felt very attached to that program, but I don't think that was the right decision regardless. As far as for your career goes, if you are working in the private system, figure out what the baseline for your school is and watch your management. See where they're trying to chip away at that baseline, and that's where you can resist most easily, and keep your students protected, keep yourself protected, and reach out to your colleagues as well.
Great advice.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Wonderful. Okay, that was great. Thank you so much, Andrew, for taking the time to join us today, and thank you for sharing your journey, and best of luck in your future career. I hope it all goes well.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure being here.
Andrew, thanks so much for taking the time to share your development in your teaching career with us.
Yeah, it's really important for other teachers to see that we have multiple options and ways to develop ourselves, both in terms of educating ourselves and professional development. And
as always, we love to hear your feedback. You can get in touch with us on Instagram at ESL Talk Podcast, or you can send us an email to esltalkpodcast@gmail.com.
Also, you can join us individually on Instagram at I'm Daniel Teacher
or at Learning with Faye. And we'll see you next week for another new episode of ESL Talk.